Well, today we're going to talk about how to live rent-free or practically rent-free while your landlord makes even more money. You know, how everyone can get a free lunch or close to a free lunch. So meet Sean the handyman. I took this picture, obviously not. It's just clip art, but it's based on a true story. Sean is uh, an excellent handyman. He's been working with me and my spouse, Dawn McMillan, for over 30 years. He's married with five adult children. He's a wonderful craftsman, but he's approaching age 60. And as you get closer to 60, life does tend to change. You focus on different things, perhaps than when you were in your 30s and 40s and 50s. His marketing for his services, his rental services, is exclusively word of mouth. He's never had a website, wouldn't really know what one was, other than he's seen a few because I've shown him a few. He comes from a long line of blue collar workers going back many generations, and he has never owned a home. And what's interesting to me, as somebody who is a real estate and business guy, is he's never wanted to own a home, since home ownership, in his view, and truthfully, he's right, can have big unexpected outlays. He also doesn't have a pension plan. If you ask Sean about it, he'd say, "What's a pension?" Um, and fairly recently, after promising Sean he could stay, quote unquote, forever, his sister in law actually booted him out of a house that she owned and had rented to him and his family for many years, and so she could sell it and make more money. You can imagine this created some difficulty amongst the family. So he asked me, well, what am I going to do? I guess I'll have to rent another place, and maybe the rent will be higher, and so on and so forth. And he was a little concerned because he is approaching 60, and might not be able to work at quite the same level in his 60s, and certainly in 70s or even 80s. So I said to him, Sean, why don't you use your skills to create a for every home a job, FEHAJ opportunity for yourself? And he said, what the heck is that? And I said, well, look, let's do this. And so what happened was he rented a townhome in a suburb. He lives in Ottawa, Canada, the national capital region, and he rented a home for about $1,600 a month. But here's where it gets interesting. He made an arrangement with the landlord to add a one-bedroom basement suite. So what we were looking for was a townhome in a suburb that had separate access to the basement, but an undeveloped basement. Sean would provide all of the labor for free. The landlord would pay for all of the materials. And the basement suite with its own entry would be rented by Sean. He would become what's called a sub landlord, and he would rent that, and which in fact he did. So after building his one bedroom basement apartment, where he provided again all the labor for free, the landlord provided all the materials, he was able to rent it for around $1,250 a month, plus $115 for a tech package. That means, internet, Wi-Fi, Netflix, Crave TV, all these good things, Spotify. Another $95 for electricity every month for a total of $1,460. This is where it gets interesting. The promise to the landlord was that the landlord would make 30% of whatever Sean got in additional rent from renting out the basement, and Sean would get 70%. So the landlord got an extra $375 a month or $4,500 a year. And again, the landlord doesn't have to make any money. Sorry, it doesn't have to do any work. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is what's called an augmented tenancy. The landlord, as I said, paid for the materials, which was around $20,000 to do the basement. Sean put in his labor, which would have been about $40,000 if the landlord had to hire some contractor to do it. The landlord recovers his costs for materials in less than 5 years. Sean gets an extra $1,085 in his jeans every month from the basement rental. And so he's able to live in his own townhouse for around $515 a month. So it's not quite free, but it's certainly a lot less than $1,500, $1,600, $2,000, whatever. And the interesting thing that we were able to do is we were able to get a long-term lease from the landlord. And this was important to Sean. He doesn't want to have to move again, or at least not soon. And it provides him with protection from eviction. From the landlord's point of view, It's also a good news story. There's no vacancy and no tenant churn, no make-ready costs for 7 years. Make-ready costs are significant costs where you have to, if you have a tenant moves out every year, you have to spend time cleaning it, maybe repainting it. Maybe it takes 2 weeks and you lose some rent. So it's quite expensive. So from the landlord's point of view, the landlord's making even more money with less work, and he also has, or she also has, less vacancy. So this was defined by Alex Culligan, one of the young men I coach. What is a sublet? What is an augmented tenancy? Some of you have already seen this before, but I'll repeat it again. Augmented tenancy, Alex defined on Urban Dictionary, is a real estate leasing technique whereby the landlord and tenant cooperate to sublet a portion of the property or unit and split the rent, revenue, and responsibilities of the sublease. Unlike traditional subletting, the tenant remains in the unit in the property along with the subtenant. Unlike just getting a roommate, there is a hierarchy between the tenant and the subtenant. The tenant assumes some but not all of the landlord's responsibility, effectively becoming more than just a tenant. He or she is an augmented tenant, hence the term augmented tenancy. And I use also the term sublandlord. The first one that was ever done by Alex and by a lot of the people I coach, the very first one I think was in Rockland. It was she was a single mom with I think 3 kids, and she was able to lease a very large house because she had the landlord's permission, in this case Alex's permission, to sublet an existing basement suite. And we're going to see her video in a moment, and I know some of you have already seen the video, so I apologize if you're looking at it again. The idea is to find a place with an in-home suite, rent the whole thing from the sub-landlord, sublet the in-home suite, kind of bribing the landlord to cooperate by sharing revenue with him or her, and pocketing the balance to offset against your rent. All right. From the point of view of the landlord, it does help him or her as well. They only have one tenant to deal with because you, if you're the tenant, are also the sub-landlord, right? And then from the tenant's point of view, have much more control over the property. And I think we're going to see more 7-year residential leases, even 10-year residential leases. If you can live for close to free, why not have a 5-year or 10-year lease? All right, see if this works now. We'll see if we can boot up this video that Alex made.
At first I was very hesitant because I wasn't sure if I could handle like what it entitled for me. But then getting to know a little bit more about it, I was kind of open to the idea, but still a little hesitant. But thank you, Alex, for explaining everything to me and making me more at ease with it. It's helped me immensely. It's helped with the rent. It's helped with the things around the house. They do help, and it helps to being able to rely on someone since we do have a good relationship with the people downstairs. They also have pets, so they take care of mine. So it's actually built a friendship, and it's turned out really great. Yes, actually, because it's actually really helping. Like I said, that they are great tenants. But I think it would because, first of all, like I said, it lowers the rent. So for me, it's kind of a piece of cake to be living in this really great place. Like, and it's big, so it's perfect for us. And it's actually pretty simple. So yeah, definitely, I would really here to stay a little longer. Hard to think of it like that because I've never even thought of having it like that. But since they refer to me as the landlord, it's kind of like, ooh, okay. But yes, I do. I do feel like this is a little bit more at my home since I have a little bit more control of what goes on in here. And at first I thought it was going to be hard, but within a week we found him. And with my property manager and with you, Alex, it was nice to be able to count on someone to help me show the house and explain, like answer all the questions and whatnot. But no, it was actually pretty easy. I'm really thankful for that. Yeah, so I signed my lease in mid-March, and I had someone a week after. So I had someone before April 1st, which is whenever they came in. So it felt great, and even my first month rent, I didn't have to pay in full. going great. I definitely would recommend it to anybody who could do it.
Okay, that's a cute video, but it's also quite touching, and it's an amazing technique, this augmented tenancy, to help people and to help ourselves if you're a landlord like I am, and Alex is, and many others are, so we can benefit both parties. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more interesting in some ways. What if I could persuade Sean to actually buy a home for himself and his family? The downside, as we've already talked about, is the unexpected major repair costs like you have with any property. Maybe it needs a new roof from time to time, new windows, a new furnace. Those are significant costs. But the upside is that when you own a house, there is hopefully property appreciation. Property goes up in value. You get some rental income, maybe from a micro suite or a basement apartment, adds to your cash flow. And over time, you pay down the mortgage. It boosts your retirement prospects further. The question that Sean would ask me if he were here would be, okay, how would I ever get the down payment for that? And I've come up with something that I think is kind of cool. Let's see if we could bootstrap a house for Sean. So what are some of the ways that he might be able to come to own a house? I'm not going to go through all of these techniques, but they have been used. Rent to own, which has its own issues and problems. A GoFundMe account, I suppose, is possible. Seller financing. It used to be called a vendor take back. It's now called a seller take back mortgage. It's where most of the finance comes from a seller who is motivated as opposed to a bank or a lender. Many banks are not really interested in entrepreneurs like Sean. Doesn't really have a steady job. He makes a decent living, but doesn't have a steady job, predictable income. He's not a government worker. So many of the banks are in fact closed to people like Sean. But there's another one that I have a lot of experience with, which is called Scrip, and you can see it here on the screen. I'll just sort of circle it here. So what is Scrip? So here's that picture I took of Sean again. What if Sean were to create gift certificates or work certificates, I think might be a better word. He does anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000 worth of work for me every year. And I'll bet you he has at least 20 other clients like that, if not more. He doesn't do it 60,000 for 20 clients every year. He'd obviously have a much bigger business, but he would have lots of clients like this. He's collected them over a lifetime. What if Sean sold, say, a $5,000 coupon to 20 of his top clients for, say, 10% off? All right, that means he would collect close to $100,000 in cash, right, with a promise to to do the work when and if Prof. Bruce or anyone else needs it. The reason that people would buy these kinds of coupons is because they like Sean and want to help him, but also they're getting some kind of a break on the price perhaps, and they trust Sean. That's a very important part of this. This is a type of script, just so you know it's not new. This was, I think, in the 1870s or 1880s. This is a lumber company, and they were paying their employees with script back then. $5 due to the bearer in trade at the local store, the local company store, by the way. So these gift certificates or things that you buy, from, I don't know, Indigo or Chapters or any number of stores, these things have been around for a long time. Just for the hockey fans out there, Conn Smythe built Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto in the Great Depression, and he paid, I think, most of his workers with a kind of scrip, right? It was called the Carlton Street Cash Box. And there is risk, too. If you're an unemployed iron worker, concrete worker, turner and fitter, whatever, and you go and work for Conn Smythe in the 1930s, you're not paid in Canadian dollars or American dollars. You're paid in this kind of script. And if the business is not successful, if Sean, for example, doesn't come and redeem those for you, or if you buy something, a gift certificate at Chapters, as I mentioned, and you go there and the store is broke, you will not be able to redeem it. So there is some risk there. And Conn Smythe explained to the workers who came to work for him, and thousands did, by the way. I think they built this building in 6 months. It was incredible. Rather than sitting at home, unemployed, come and work for me for 6 months. When we open up this building, if the building is a success, I will redeem, that is, Conn Smythe will redeem your script for cash, i.e. Canadian dollars. And of course, the Maple Leafs and Maple Leaf Gardens was a big success, so people did get paid. But there is a risk. In case you're wondering, in Canada, we have Canadian Tire dollars. I bet you almost everybody in Canada has some Canadian Tire money somewhere in their house or apartment. And Disney's been doing this for a long time, and Disney doesn't give you any discount, by the way. They don't give you a 10% discount. You buy one Disney dollar, it's redeemable in the park for one US dollar. So there's no discount. All right. But I'm going to also talk about a local Ottawa entrepreneur. Her name is Tracy Clark, and she's the owner of Fair Trade Coffee House Bridgehead in Ottawa. And she raised several $1 million with this technique to fund her expansion. Here's Tracy. She bought the original assets of Bridgehead out of bankruptcy. It's more than a generation ago now. And they were asking $650,000. I know because I talked to the trustee for the estate. And Tracy had, I think, about $35,000 in savings at the time. So that's what we offered. And that's what she, in fact, paid. It took a few months to convince the trustee to eventually sell all those assets to her for $35,000. But she did. And who said, if you don't ask, you don't get? Well, it was this guy, Mahatma Gandhi, who led the Indian independence movement from the British. Kicking the British out of India was not easy. And when he was asked how he planned to do it, it was through nonviolent protest. And he said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So he asked, and eventually India did get its independence. So Tracy doesn't really like debt. But scrip is really kind of different from debt. She was able to sell $3.5 million worth of scrip, which helped her. That was her equity contribution to the $15 million expansion to build what you see on the screen here, which is a new roastery and a big shop. This is, I think, her biggest shop in Ottawa, and it was a brand new roastery. It's quite expensive. And customers bought scrip in denominations of $250, $500, and $1,000, which is pretty freaking huge amounts of money. The whole program was called, Tracy called it Plant a Bean, which I thought was pretty cool. So why would anybody, fork out $250 to help Bridgehead? Well, because they love the coffee, they like the ambiance of the stores and the free Wi-Fi. They like the fact that she's an underdog and she's local. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. They trust her. Hopefully she doesn't go out of business before they redeem their gift certificates or their scrip. And another reason is they got a 20% return. And that's a pretty good return when you look at, I put an ad here, which I picked out a few years ago from Allied Bank, who were, barking that they had, a whole 0.99% interest on their savings accounts. And, you know, it takes a long time to get rich at 1% per annum. So 20% return is a lot better. Customers who buy these gifts anywhere from $250 to $1,000, believe it or not, if you're spending $5 a day at Bridgehead, say $4 4 days a week, that's $20 a week. Even $1,000 coupon, you're going to redeem that in about a year. And if you get 20% on your money in a year, on your $1,000, which you would have spent there anyway, that's a pretty good return. So you might think that her cost of capital was 20%. She was giving her customers a 20% bonus on every one of these script cards that she sold. So her cost of capital is 20%, right? Which is pretty expensive. But you'd be wrong. Sir, negative, sir. That was not her cost of capital. If her gross profit management is 0.6, and it means that for every $5 in script that she sells, her cost is actually $3.75. The way to think about the gross profit margin is this: it doesn't cost $5 to sell $5 worth of coffee. The cost is much less, even if you include labor, and of course if you include beans. So her actual cost is $3.75. So if she's selling $5 worth of script, her cost when they redeem it is $3.75. Her cost to actually provide this capital or to source this capital is a negative $1.25 for every $5 raised. It's negative perspiration, right? Perspiration, I guess is the way to pronounce that. In other words, her cost of capital wasn't 20%, it was negative. Try getting that from a bank. And you've heard me say this before for people who follow me. You know, banks do not really like entrepreneurs. If you work for the government and your spouse works for the government and you've got great credit scores and predictable income, yes, they'll give you a credit card and they might give you a mortgage. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's really tough. So we have to be a little bit more inventive. So there you go. What do Canadian banks say to most entrepreneurs? No. All right. So if you think about Sean the handyman and you substitute some other kind of gig, what have you got? You have the same kind of idea, right? You can do exactly the same thing. You could be an animal groomer, a designer, a coach like me. You could be an electrician, a decorator, a yoga instructor. You could be a music teacher, right? You could be a personal support worker. You could be a roofer. I mean, there's a million gigs out there. All of the ideas that I'm talking about now, whether we're talking about Tracy Clark and Bridgehead or we're talking about Sean the handyman, they'll all work for you. So where did this idea come from, Prof. Bruce? Right? You know, where did I get this idea from? And I'll show you. This is something that Tim Moore, he's a former student of mine. He's both an architect and architectural technologist. He studied with me at Carleton University's Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism. And we have designed, this is a coach house, which is like a little backyard house that we've designed. And we call this the Gigaplex Mini. So it's a little coach house that would fit in your backyard. This particular model is designed for my backyard, which is quite a big backyard, and this coach house is 841 square feet. Now, what makes this any different from anything else that you might see? Well, here's the ground floor. It's pretty standard. It's got 2 bedrooms. It's got 2 baths in it. It's got a living room, kitchen. Nothing really special about it. We don't really put in dining rooms anymore because people just don't seem to have time to sit down in formal dining areas. So we put in lunch counters, which you can see. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving around here. Then you've got a Cheater ensuite. It serves both the master bedroom and the public area, so it's double loaded. But what makes this a gigaplex, what makes this special is the microsuite here. So this is about 180 or 200 square foot microsuite. What is a microsuite? Many of you, again, who followed me know what it is. It's a place that has its own micro kitchen here, so tiny kitchen, its own bathroom here. And what's interesting about this microsuite, it's a completely self-contained studio apartment, and it has its own door to the outside. So here's the door to the outside, and it is a double-loaded condition, which means it has access to the main apartment, and the main apartment has access to the microsuite, but it also has access to the outside. The other thing that we designed into it is that both the main door to the main apartment and the side door to the microsuite are both zero-step entry. About 24% of Canadians will be over the age of 65, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says by 2032, which means that if somebody has a walker or wheelchair, this means it's easy to enter, or if there's a young mom or young dad with a baby carriage, they can just wheel directly in, or if they're bringing groceries in, it's pretty simple. So I really like the zero-step idea, but especially for elders. This is the basement area. It has its own ingress and egress from the outside. It has what I call a manufactured walkout condition, which I'll show you on the next slide. And this one is designed for an office. So there's 3 offices down here in a reception area. That's where I hope to put my coaching practice when we finish the finished building. We were going to build it this year. This is 2020 when I'm recording this, but when COVID-19 hit, everything went to heck in a handbasket, so it's probably going to be next year. But I would like to move my coaching practice there. But this could also be another apartment downstairs, right? So here is the elevation. It's kind of an isometric view. You can see it's opened a little bit here, so we get more light in the basement. And this is the manufactured walkout condition. So the basement entry is quite nice. It's a little bit wider. It allows more air and light to the basement, so it doesn't feel quite like a basement. This is just another view. Here's the main door over here, and you can see it's a zero-step entry. And here's what makes the Gigaplex work, which is this side door to a microsuite, right? So, and again, you can see it's a zero-step entry. This is simply the site plan. This is my house here. I happen to live on a corner, so this is River Brick Road, and this is Parkland. And the coach house would go here in our backyard and would have its own little driveway and entry. So what could that micro suite be used for? Well, you could take, if I was living in the coach house, or a tenant of mine was living in the coach house and he or she wanted to do, say, an augmented tenancy, which I would encourage. It could be a home-based nail bar, so they could have a little business there. Or it could be an in-home, if I'm a PSW, personal support worker, if I have my PSW certificate, I could take in an elder. Could use it if I'm an RMT, registered massage therapist. I could use it for my RMT practice or maybe a physiotherapy practice. I could use it for pet grooming or maybe home-based daycare. I could use it as a small yoga studio or hair salon. I could use it for tutoring, or maybe I could run a bookkeeping office out of there. Whoops. Maybe I'm a crafter and I have an Etsy store and I need room for my crafts. Maybe I'm a teacher of crafts. People always ask me, where do you find ideas for your next great startup? And a lot of my students over the years, I tell them to go to a library. Some of the young people don't even know what a library is, but there are things called books. And go and look at the encyclopedia circa maybe the 1930s. And a lot of great ideas are coming from bringing back skills that have maybe been lost in the last 100 years, or for that matter, 1,000 years, and wrapping a modern business era model around it. So that's part of what we do when we're stumped for ideas. Let's look at what people did and what may be in demand today, again, with a modern business model wrapped around it. All right, it's time for the big reveal. Why do I call it a gigaplex? All right, so it's called a gigaplex, and the tagline, for all of those you guys in Pivot and elsewhere who are starting businesses or growing businesses, you want to have a great name and you want to have a great tagline. For my coaching practice, I'm Prof. Bruce, and my tagline is making impossible possible. For the gigaplex, home free. It has a number of meanings. The tagline has a number of meanings. If you remember when you were a kid and you played hide and seek, when you were running home, you would scream out home free. So I thought that was a beautiful memory, at least for me. Free as the wind blows, free as a bird. It was a wonderful thing. I'm 68, so it's a long time ago now, but I remember playing hide and seek and shouting home free. I really enjoyed that. It's also a free home for tenants, or practically free home for tenants. Um, but the investor gets it for free too, because it has a higher cap rate compared to other properties. And I called it gigaplex. Initially, I was going to call it, I think, megaplex, but mega is like a million, and giga is a billion, so there's inflation. So I called it gigaplex. And the other reason I called it a gigaplex is that we're heading towards a gig economy. So gigaplex has a bunch of different meanings, and home free has a bunch of different connotations. So I think that's a decent way to name things and to have a tagline that has some significance. The gigaplex idea is not just for a coach house in your backyard. You could gigaplex an entire building. In this case, this is a design that Tim Moore and I have worked on for gigaplexing a triplex, but there's no reason why you couldn't gigaplex a 20-story building or a 60-story building. And what's interesting about, say, gigaplexing a 60-story building in downtown Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal or New York City or San Francisco is that you would have an opportunity for people to live in these very expensive places, certainly Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Boston, Nashville, Austin, very desirable cities, Vancouver, Toronto. They're very expensive to live there. But if you had this idea of a micro suite where you could earn a living, you could run a business, you could put it on Airbnb, you could take in an elder, that would be a way to offset some of the very high cost of living. And again, here it is. It's a two-bedroom gigaplex here, two-bedroom gigaplex here, two-bedroom gigaplex here. And again, you've got the lower level, the basement, with the manufactured walkout condition. So very similar to what we've talked about. And I'm talking to another young man I coach, Brad Cartier, where he's going to build. We've got the Gigaplex Mini, which is the coach house I showed you, the Gigaplex Triplex, but he's talking about a Gigaplex Duo. So basically, you just chop off the top floor. So the Duo is a duplex, the Gigaplex Triplex is the triplex, the Gigaplex Mini is a single floor, but they all have the extra bonus of let's say, a home office in the basement. So you've seen this plan before. This is the Gigaplex Triplex. This is the ground floor. No need to talk about it again. Here's the basement. You've seen that before as well. Now we're on the second floor. So you might say, well, how in the world could you Gigaplex, the 21st floor of a building, or for that matter, the second, third floor? Here's how it works. You come up here, and here's a landing, and here's the microsuite again. Again, it has a Juliet balcony, so you have some fresh air coming in here. It's a microsuite with its own bathroom, its own micro kitchen, and again, this double loaded condition. So again, if your tenant has her PSW and they bring in an elderly person to take care of her or him, they can go in there and check whether they took their pills, whether they've had enough to eat that day, if there's anything that they need. But the elder also has privacy by simply closing and locking this door. So the microsuite works just as well on the second floor, or like I said, the 21st floor or the 41st floor of any building, right? Could be a place where you operate a business, but it could also be a place that you put on Airbnb. Let's just do some numbers for as an example. Say you rented this 2-bedroom apartment in a place like Ottawa for $1,800 a month, and I took in, or the PSW took in, an elderly people pay atrocious amounts of money to live in what I call crappy retirement residences and long-term care facilities. I've never liked them. I like them even less in a time of COVID-19. So anyway, he or she could live in this place for, instead of paying $3,500, $4,500, $5,500 a month for retirement residence, the PSW could maybe charge her or him $2,500 a month, including a meal plan. In this case, then, they're paying $1,800 a month to the landlord, taking in $2,500 a month, giving the landlord a percentage of that as a percentage rent, so the landlord has a little incentive to let them do it. And probably now they can live rent-free. Same thing if you rented this out on Airbnb or vacation rental by owner, and you took in somebody who pays $100 a night instead of going to a hotel. They're in the microsuite here, and if you rent it out for 25 days a month, you get $2,500 in income. Same deal, right? So it works. This is my favorite. This is the third floor. You come up here, here's the landing, and here's the microsuite here. It has access to the balcony, has, again, access to the main apartment and vice versa. It really is an effective and efficient floor plan. And again, as I said, you could build an entire 40, 50, 60-story building out of these things. So I really do think it's the real solution to affordable housing. Many of you have heard this, don't give a person a fish, you give somebody a fish he or she eats for a day. You give a person a fishing rod to eat for a lifetime. So I think it's a real opportunity to create affordable housing. I've done a little bit of coaching for Habitat for Humanity, and they have adopted this model. So if Habitat can do it, you as a landlord or you as a tenant can do it. Tenants can do this too, right? You can approach landlords, as Sean did, and many others are doing now that I teach and coach. So if you're a tenant, you can live for free or close to free. If you're a landlord, you can make more money. Either way, I think it's a win-win. So what will the future bring? People are asking me that more and more because we're in a very tough, difficult time, really unprecedented. I've said it before elsewhere that since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in the early 1700s, we have never had a situation where we've lost as many jobs in such a short time as we have in Canada, in China, in the United States, and elsewhere. There's just never been a circumstance that I could find where major economies have melted down as quickly as they have over the last half a year. So no one really knows what's going to happen, and I'm doing a little bit of work with the City of Ottawa on their new official plan. A new plan is due out next year, 2021, but it's possible now it may be delayed. But I am suggesting, encouraging the City of Ottawa and other cities where I do some coaching and keynote speaking to follow Barcelona's example. They would like to become completely self-sufficient, not 90%, completely self-sufficient by 2050, and I think that's an opportunity. This is a wonderful shot of Barcelona, beautiful city. They want to be self-sufficient in energy, food, waste, textiles, manufactured goods, services, medicines, you name it. I think it's a very, very good goal, and I think we need to give that some thought. I do a little bit of coaching as well in Portugal, and when I was there a couple of years ago, I took some pictures in a tiny village called Pinhal. It's in the north of Portugal, and pretty much every house had a backyard homestead. So in terms of being more self-sufficient, we can do it. You know, it wasn't that long ago in Canada and the United States that pretty much everybody who could had a backyard garden, and they were growing fruits and vegetables, produce, you know, nuts and berries, you name it. And we should start doing that again, in my view. This is Philip Rivers and his spouse, Tiffany. They have 9 kids. If you actually count the number of kids that they have in this picture, there's only 8, but there is now number 9. Tiffany had another baby. And I asked myself, why is it that Philip and Tiffany have so many kids and other people are really struggling, you know, to have children at all, whether it's 1 or 2. I personally have 5 children, but and I love kids, and I'm sure Philip and Tiffany do as well. But why is it that so many people are struggling? Well, it does help that Philip Rivers makes 20 million US dollars a year. You know, don't kid yourself. That really does help. So I think a big part of the reason why so many men and women, so many couples are choosing not to have children is financial. And I have a suggestion for that. Why don't we create something in Ottawa called an O-Town dollar? We could have our own currency. And people say, well, you can't have your own currency. Sure you can. They have the Calgary dollar, the Tamworth dollar, I guess, or $12. Salt Spring, $5. The Kawartha loon, the Salt Spring dollar. You know, many communities in the United States also have their own currencies. Why don't we have a currency? So how would you ever do that? I asked myself. Well, here's the O-Town dollar, and I'm hoping, I don't know if I'll get the City of Ottawa to agree, but I'm hoping that they will add it to their official plan. And so if you had an O-Town dollar, what would you do with it? Well, I would let any business or organization buy them from the city at an exchange rate, just like Disney does with Disney dollars. You want to buy an O-Town dollar and you're a business, you can buy them and give them to clients, customers, suppliers, whatever. But one O-Town dollar would equal 1 Canadian dollar. And I would make sure that the city made a little bit of money because they have to manage the system. So there might be a fee on it of 3 or 3.5%, something like that. It would be both a paper currency and a digital currency, probably using blockchain technology to keep track of it. And people would be able to earn O-Town dollars. You know, students do volunteer hours. If the city wants to hand out awards, they can hand out an award and some money. The money, though, would be O-Town dollars, not Canadian dollars. We could compensate people for disasters, whether it's COVID-19 disasters or a tornado disaster. The reason I put tornado in there is my house was hit by a tornado in Ottawa in 2018. We had $120,000 in damage. So it would have been nice if the city had a few O-Town dollars for me back then. Maybe for internships, serving on city committees. Um, Maybe for housing allowances, maybe helping startups start up with some capital, helping projects deemed to be of net benefit to the city. Maybe you could pay people who mentor and coach entrepreneurs, right, with O-Town dollars. And you could also provide O-Town dollar loans. In other words, instead of going to a secondary lender, which might cost you 10, 12, or 15% or more with fees, maybe for projects deemed worthy and for startups, you could loan them some O-Town dollars at very low interest rates. And also maybe we could give people who are raising children some additional support. Maybe we could give them up to $1,000 a month for every child. Would that help people? I think it might. Now you might say, oh yeah, but there's no way that you know, you can do anything with O-Town dollars. Well, that isn't actually the case. I think you could. Now here I put on the screen for you 2 supermarkets. One a supermarket, one is a local grocery store. The supermarket has a sign in its window saying no shirt, no shoes, no service, and below that, no O-Town dollars accepted here. But down the road, there's a little groceteria and they have a sign in their window saying, "We love O Town dollars." So everybody with O Town dollars goes to visit this little grocery store, and the supermarket notices it. Their business is going down a few percent every month, and they go, that's not good. So competition, I think, would encourage other stores to start to accept it. And maybe you need some help in one of your buildings, and you call up a plumber and you say, "Hey, listen, I've got about 300 O Town dollars. Can I pay you part or all of your fee to come here and fix my plumbing with O Town dollars?" And he or she, the plumber, says, "No way, I don't accept that. That's banana currency. No, not accepting that." You go, "Okay." But then you notice online that there's a bunch of Ottawa plumbers or San Francisco plumbers that say, "Yeah, San Francisco dollars accepted here, O Town dollars accepted here, Calgary dollars accepted here." So that plumber gets more and more business, and the other plumber finds his or her business is going down the tubes, so to speak, and pretty soon that second plumber, or the first plumber, I guess, is accepting O Town dollars, right? So it will work, in my opinion, and it will spread. I really believe change is coming and we have to adapt. It's adapt or die. And sometimes we're meaning that literally, and sometimes we're meaning that figuratively, but change is coming and we must adapt to it. A client of mine asked me, "Hi, Bruce, what are your thoughts on real estate and the economy over the next 12 to 24 months?" This was a few months ago as we got into the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic. And what I answered him was, "I have no idea. No one really knows." And anybody who says they can predict what's going to happen in 6 months or a year, it's really not, that is not reality. But I do think that I have some guesses, and I'm going to share those with you. I think residential real estate probably will be affected, but it will be the least impacted in terms of its value. Everybody needs a place to live. High rise, however, will be impacted more. I think, if you live on the 65th floor of a tower in Manhattan and you have to go out and get a liter of milk, you have to go down an elevator and back up an elevator. And I really suspect that the demand for high rise residential may fall, and prices may also fall. By the way, about 40% of rich dudes in Manhattan left Manhattan at the height of the COVID-19 crisis to go to their nice places in the Hamptons. So you can tell that rich people are reacting, right? Industrial property will also fall in value, but not as much as say office space or retail space. Why is that? Because we need industrial. We need, more personal protective equipment. We need more stuff that, if your washing machine breaks down, you need parts for that. If your car breaks down, you need parts for that. So industrial will be affected, but less. Industrial space, office space and retail space are already falling off a cliff. More and more people will work from home and will want to work from home even after the COVID-19 thing passes, I believe. And recreational travel and tourism is being decimated. You all know that. But there are opportunities, right? I mean, with every crisis, there are opportunities. And I'll give you an example here on the screen. Some of you heard me talk about this before. If you owned a hotel, you might convert it from overnight stays to medium and long-term rentals, right? You might change that, right? And I think I have a picture. One of my clients has 1,300 rooms in, I think, 6 towns. Fortunately for him, about 1,000 of his rooms are existing micro suites. In other words, they have a little kitchen and a little work area, a little study area, entertainment area, and they could be converted. About 1,000 of them could be converted to medium-term rentals and long-term rentals. So everybody will pivot and change. We have to do that. If you think about this particular client, if he converts 1,000 of his rooms to long-term or medium-term rentals, say he were to rent 1,000 of them out as micro suites for 2 years, it means instead of having to do 365,000 sales a year to keep them full, he only has to do 500 leases a year. And what's really great about this conversion is that it creates for him committed monthly recurring revenues, which is the holy grail of business. You want to have committed monthly recurring revenues. So instead of having to fill up the rooms every day, week after week, month after month, he could have almost 3/4 of his rooms spoken for 2-year periods. This idea is not new. one of my friends, Costa Pilavaki, was the son of the Greek ambassador to Canada. This is now 2 generations ago, not 1 generation ago. And and his family lived in this grand old hotel in Ottawa called the Chateau Laurier. I think it's called the Fairmont Chateau Laurier today. And they had this most beautiful suite of rooms. So the idea of having long-term rentals in hotels is not new. It goes back probably to the 1800s, and certainly the early 1900s, and then 1950s and 60s, etc. So it's not new. And there's probably a business model in this. As you know, I'm keen on business models. I don't think you should do a startup or grow your existing business without having a business model. I suspect that there's a tremendous opportunity for people who are interested to buy hotels that have 90% vacancies, 80% vacancies, very high vacancy rates, probably get a lot of seller financing and convert them to medium-term and long-term rentals. And it's happening already. I just randomly picked this out. Here's what is it, a 52-room hotel in Florida for sale. The asking price is like $100,000. I mean, it's probably completely empty right now or near close to that. And no deposit required. They'll provide all the financing. So for entrepreneurs, like many of the people who are watching and listening to me, there are tremendous opportunities that will show up in the next 12 to 18 months, in my opinion, right? So I'm just guessing like everybody else, but hopefully they're educated guesses. These are just pictures I took off the internet of this particular hotel. I'm not recommending this, but there you go. So this is what a micro suite looks like. It's the hottest trend in real estate by far. It's much more popular than having roommates today. As you know, if you had a roommate and he or she was working in the operating room or the ICU at a hospital, it puts you at risk. And roommates are always arguing, right? Who drank the last beer? Who ate the last pizza? Whose turn is it to clean the bathroom? So this is a typical micro suite. This one is about 330 square feet. It's got a sleeping area here. It's got its own little bathroom here. It's got its micro kitchen here, entertainment and work area here. And access to the outside is really important because A, the spaces are small, and B, if you're in a northern shelf city in Canada or the United States, you're cooped up for so much. So you want to have access to the outside as best you can. And in case you're wondering how small they can be, I've been following this project at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and they've been building micro suites for their students because, again, even students don't want to have roommates anymore. They would like to have some independence. And they're so small they call them nano micro suites, or I'm going to call them nano suites. And there's a video if you want to look for it here. You can. Sorry, it's such a complicated link. Here's shots or pictures of the inside. So it's got the little micro kitchen here. Here's a shot of the micro suite. The bed turns into a desk, and the desk turns into a bed. It's got a decent bathroom here. And here's the floor plan. Enter here, closet, kitchenette, a little bit of storage. There's your bed that turns into a desk, and desk turns into a bed, and here's the bathroom. 140 square feet. I'm almost done, so I've kept you way too long, so I've got a couple more slides and then we're done. I also think that this is an opportunity COVID-19 brings with an opportunity to experiment with society. Maybe we could change things a little bit. In Canada, we're already experimenting now with a guaranteed minimum income, a GMI. It's called the SURB benefit, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. Two of my children are on it now because they lost their jobs. And it's a very welcome bridge to get across this chasm created by COVID-19. But it could lead to a permanent fixture for Canada, maybe for the United States and other countries, called a guaranteed minimum income. And it probably would lead to more startups. If you had a guaranteed $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month coming from government, and you wanted to start your own business, might be more inclined to try it. Hopefully it'll be successful. When you earn enough money, the government will tax it back. Your GMI I'm talking about. Maybe we could experiment with new energy production and storage technologies. I certainly think we're going to see more work from home. We've talked about maybe an affordable housing solution like the Gigaplex. And I really think we have to provide better working conditions and pay. You know, it really disturbs me that we think of grocery clerks as essential workers, and then after the crisis passes, we treat them very poorly, in my opinion. Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, I'm not a political person, I don't support any political party, but the Prime Minister in Canada has been musing aloud about a 4-day work week. I would support that, 4 10-hour days instead of 5 8-hour days, put less stress on the earth. And maybe we could even have 1 day a week. We used to have that. It used to be Sundays in Canada and the United States, not anymore, where we just close everything except emergency services to give basically the earth a break from feverish activity of humanity. Maybe there'll be some new ways of delivering different yet improved distance learning. And I think education should perhaps focus on technology, entertainment, health, fitness, well-being, entrepreneurship, the gig economy. I think we can do more with our, our our education system than we're doing now. We have a lot of high school students who are completely disaffected and uninterested. We have to do better, in my opinion. I think there should be more cooperation and cohesion between government and the private sector to advance the social, environmental, and economic agenda. And then the last point I make here on this slide is we need more flexible zoning bylaws and zoning ordinances. This is my own particular background and expertise. I think we should allow cities to be much more experimental. We don't allow tiny homes in most communities. Why is that? Well, they're not easy to tax for property taxes, and money is power, right? So there you go. But I do think there's a whole generation of young people, certainly my kids who are millennials and maybe yours, who want lower mortgage payments. They want more disposable income. And they don't necessarily want to work themselves to death. I don't know if you know the tiny home movement tagline, less house, more life. I kind of embraced that. And I think we should build more intentional communities, neighborhoods that are diverse, collegial, self-sufficient, affordable. And they embrace both two concepts, FEHAJ, for every home a job, and for every job a home. And then I've talked about this already. We want to double down on grow local, produce local, lend local, develop local currencies, emphasize self-sufficiency in energy, waste, textile, medicines, services. How about finance, loans, insurance? We should self-insure, investment, even in manufactured goods. In Barcelona, they're talking about 3D printed cell phones. And this last point is just simply something it's been a theme of mine for now quite a few years. I think we should make 3/4 of the Earth's oceans and 2/3 of the planet's surface no-go zones for humans. Any humans. I don't care if they're bird watchers or hikers, ecotourists, no one. And you know why I say that? It's because if you want to know where ecological diversity and wildlife are flourishing most on this planet today, it really upsets me to say it, but it's true. In the demilitarized zone between the two Koreas and the exclusion zone around Chernobyl. And how come? It's because there are almost no humans there. And you can just Google it for yourself. Chernobyl has become a refuge for wildlife 33 years after the nuclear accident. Why is that? Why? Because there are no human beings there. You want to save the planet? We should carve out huge areas of the planet and just let it go back to wilderness. That's my opinion. I'm sure many of you might not agree with that, but there you go. Who said, want a less stressful life? Then don't live within your means, live below them. I said that. And then I find out, of all things, a North Korean sympathizer. He's a Spaniard. I won't say his whole name. I'll just call him by his first name, Alexandro. A Spaniard said it better. The rich person is not the one who has more money, but the one who needs less. I think that's a good lesson, and that's probably a good place to stop. So thanks much for listening to me. My name is Bruce Firestone. I'm a real estate investment and business coach, and you can reach out to me anytime, probably by email is best, bruce.firestone@century21.ca.